Well, hello, Crosswinds. Welcome back to the Crosswinds Church More Than Sunday podcast. I'm Chris Coley, senior pastor here at Crosswinds. And man, I'm excited about this podcast today. Jodie Tay is my guest. She's our associate pastor. We're talking through something that she's going to be teaching, a class she's going to be going through as part of our regathering phase 2, size of 25 or less. So enjoy this conversation with Jodie. Hello, Jodie.
Chris Coley.
We're recording. That was an awkward way to start a podcast.
I know. It's all right, though.
Hello.
You can be awkward.
I am here with Jodie Tay, our associate pastor. Jodie, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh,
the More Than Sunday
thank you.
I don't know how many episodes into this thing we are now, but
A lot.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Man. Yeah, I've been a little negligent this week. I had some meetings and things. So if anyone's listening, we're sorry that we haven't been as good this week. But I've got one here with Jodie today. And
We're back.
Sarah tomorrow. And we're excited because we're going to be talking about something that we are doing as we move into phase 2 as a church.
Yay.
So let's talk about phase 2 because you're really coordinating phase 2, Jodie.
Yeah.
And you sent us all a church-wide email on Monday.
Mhm.
Can you explain to us what phase 2 is?
Yeah, phase 2, it's almost like part 2 of phase 2 because we started with groups of 12 and under meeting on campus. We've got a lot of small groups meeting on campus right now. We've got a meeting pretty much every night of the week.
That was our phase 1.
That was phase 1. And this is kind of phase 2 of phase 2 reopening, which is starting tomorrow. The county is allowing groups of 25 or less to start meeting, but we are taking extreme precaution and getting our campus ready for that. So July 12th, which is a Sunday, that is when we will be entering phase 2 of reopening part 2.
Yeah, to be
doing
clear,
our Sunday morning classes. Yes.
our phases and our numbering of phases has nothing to do with the county's phases and their numbering of phases. So just disregard that completely when it comes to Crosswinds. We've got our own numbering system. And I don't know, is our county, are you sure it's county phase 2 or is it phase 3? I'm very
maybe
confused
phase 3.
I don't know their numbering system. I think it's like 2.5, maybe 2.5. So can I just, brag's the wrong word, but can we just toot our own horn for a little bit of a second here?
Sure, let's do that.
As a team?
Yeah.
So our governor, Gavin Newsom, announced that he was allowing churches to reopen 100 or less. Remember that? And you and Matt and I sat down, and Matt's our executive pastor, everybody. And we started to just kind of talk through, well, what's our plan going to be? Are we comfortable with that? Is it really safe? Is it not safe? What's the plan? And we said, well, let's just for a moment. And generally, I think I'm trusting of our government. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm a conspiracy theorist or, but I generally I am. But we said, if we can't entirely trust our government to tell us when it's safe to go back, what I mean by that is that they're willing to give in to churches potentially and let them go back early. And we had to create our own little stepping stones of back. What would it be? And so we came up with phase 1, which was like 12 or under, small groups, all outdoors. Remember all of that?
Yep.
Our phase 2, 25 or under, all outdoors. These classes, that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast today. Phase 3, we've been talking about like a worshiping barn and branch, outdoor worship experience, live band. We're still a little very confused as to how we could actually pull that off because it's singing and that's really a bad idea, the singing.
Right now,
And then phase 4, our live studio audience, 100, whatever. Okay. So as far as I know, no county has mentioned 25 or less outdoors. Phase 2. Nobody. It seems to me everybody's going to 100. You go from like 0 to 100, just like that.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I'm on this call with the health department last week, county health department, another call, and they say, we have an idea. How would you churches feel about opening up to 25 or less?
Did you raise your hand in that call and say we already had that idea?
And my thought was like, hey, you're reading from our playbook at Alameda County. That's exactly what we had in mind. Yeah. Yep. So I just want to say I'm proud of us. We know nothing about health. And we were able to get that figured out. Yeah. So tell us about what our phase 2 is.
Okay. So starting July 12th, because we cannot all gather again in a church setting, big church setting. We still are going to do our online services. So this is not replacing online services. That's really important.
Nothing is replacing our own. That's a great
point. No. This is in addition to what we're already doing. Sunday mornings, we're offering a handful of classes that are going to be varied content and at staggered times to allow people to start gathering in groups in 25 or less and to keep receiving content. But at this time, it's live. And it's in smaller groups.
I'm really excited about this. I'm excited because I think we'll keep doing the online thing, and that'll be important. And I hope everybody who goes to a live thing in person will also still watch our services online and track with the rest of our church. But I love this idea of having kind of like these elective classes that people can sign up for based on their interests. They're far more interactive because there's less people. Teachers who are hopefully experts in the subject.
Right.
I think this is going to be really good.
Yeah. And I think that there's room for expansion here too. I mean, we're starting with a handful of classes. We wanted to do that to see what, how comfortable people would be with coming out to the campus. And we're about 50% full, everyone. So if you're looking at registering,
we're like a month away.
And we're like a month away. So this might grow a little bit in the next couple weeks. We might add a couple more classes. But this might be what's going to hold us or see us through until we can meet again as a big church. And so there's a lot of opportunity here for some different learning opportunities for our church and teaching opportunities for people too.
That's so exciting. I'm thrilled to hear it. Okay. So tell us about the class you're going to teach. So my hope here is in the podcast coming up, I'm going to try to interview every one of these teachers, let them give us a little sneak preview of what their class is going to be. Talk to me about what you're going to be talking about. What's your class called? Do you have a name?
My name it's called Keeping Grace Real in a Fragmented World. And so I started thinking about, as Crosswinds, we are a church that continually says we choose to be united in Christ, right? We're not going to let other things divide us or separate us. We're going to be unified in the vision that Jesus has given us. And that's the thing that's going to unify us. Well, right now in our society, there are a million things that are dividing us right now. So there's more things that divide us than they unite us, really. And so I thought, the thing that really unites us as Christ followers is grace. I mean, that is the unique thing about Jesus, really. I mean, a lot of religions say Jesus was a great teacher. He was a great prophet. They agree he existed. But the thing that it should be unique about us as Christ followers is that we have received grace and we give grace. So what does that even look like for us right now in a world that is so divided? How should we kind of look, I guess, as Christ followers, right?
Yeah. What does it look like to be people of grace?
Yeah. And I think
really
that we get it wrong a lot. I'll speak for myself. The way I was kind of raised in it is the way you give and receive grace is through a list of things that you do, right? You do this. It's a list of to-dos. And I think the way that we are approaching it and have approached it as a church is it's not a list of to-dos. It's a list of things that you become. Things that you are living into. Yeah. And so that's things that mark you as a person. So that's what we're going to look at in this class. We're going to look at maybe a little bit at how we've gotten grace wrong. I use that word, but maybe we get it wrong sometimes or miss the mark with that.
Yeah.
And then ways that we can correct that trajectory and start getting it a little more right.
So if I'm correct, the content that you're teaching in this is content we've spent a lot of time talking about as a Crosswind staff over, the last 5 or 6 years. Is that right? Yep. And when I say that, I mean some really, really, really intense time talking through what it looks like. It's so hard. This is a difficult one to title or to write a short paragraph description communicating why it's worth your time. I will just say that the stuff that you're going to be talking about in this class is game changing. It is paradigm changing in terms of what it means to be a Jesus follower.
Yes. And you took the words out of my mouth, like paradigm changing. It will shift how you view yourself, your family, your community. It shifts. It totally shifts and changes how you view things and how you live completely.
There is, in fact, there's a part of me. Some of this is some stuff that we've really been walking through with Steve Girali over 5 or 6 years. There's a part of me that has really wanted to, maybe we'll do this when we're done with the coronavirus. When we're done.
We're done with the coronavirus.
That seems like it'll be never. But maybe we'll keep our podcast going and we'll just do 30 episodes on this content because
easy.
It is. There's so much to mine in it when it comes to really how, as people of Jesus, our trajectory on what we believe or what we think life is all about or what we think it is to follow Jesus has gotten a little bit off track.
Yep.
And when it gets off track and you keep going on that trajectory, you get 10 miles down the
Way
road,
off.
all of a sudden, because you were on the wrong trajectory, you're way further than where you could have been, should have been, had you been on the right way. And so what you're going to do is really help people understand where their trajectory should be so that as they continue journeying, they can be in a good spot. So let's do this because this is also generic and probably listening to this being like, what in the world?
What are you talking about?
Let's talk about one little piece. Like I know you've got like 4 things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one of them.
You want me to give you an example?
Yeah.
I'll give you the most basic example of one of them.
Okay.
As a Christ follower, I have been told that I need to do what's right and stand up for what is right. That word right. Okay. Well, in our class, we're going to look at.
Wait, let's go back. Okay. Stand up for what's right. Do what's right. Like
it's all about steal. Being right.
Like don't.
Rules.
Okay. Rules. Yeah. Do's and don'ts.
All right. So we'll talk about the way sometimes we get off is by feeling like everything's about following rules and being right and standing up for what we think is right.
In the way that I know that I'm following God, in the way that I know I'm being a good Christian. So if I were to evaluate it, it's
yes.
To what degree I am doing right correctly.
Doing right correctly. That's how you measure. That's your measuring stick.
Right.
So to speak. Okay. And it's assumed that doing the right thing is always going to be the good thing, right? We assume that.
Yes.
So let me give you this example. Very basic. So 2 years ago, my kid comes from school and he says, I got in trouble at the end of recess. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, the bell rang. And when the bell rings, I'm supposed to line up to go into class. But I saw that my friend had fallen on the playground. He was crying. And instead of lining up, I went and helped my friend. And the teacher got mad at me because I didn't follow the rules and I didn't line up and get in line. And I said, oh my God. I said, okay, here's the struggle with this. Doing the right thing for him meant following the rules and getting in line. And yet, in my opinion, he did the good thing by going to help a friend.
Yeah, but Jodie, what was his excuse all the other times?
This time he got it right, Chris.
I'm kidding. Yeah. Right. So go back. I didn't mean to.
You just derailed that. Anyway, so what we're looking at is sometimes the right thing is not necessarily the good thing. And what does it mean for us as Christ followers to live into what is good versus what's right? Because they're not always the same thing. Sometimes they are, but
they're not always the same thing. It's a great example you've just given. There's another one that's in the Bible where Jesus is out and he is with his disciples and they start picking grain on the Sabbath so that they can eat something. And the Pharisees see this and say, this is wrong. Am I taking your class content? I don't mean to.
You might be, but it's all right. Go ahead.
Well, long story short, he says they're doing what's good. They got to eat. You got to eat, right? I think it is so important, and it sounds so elementary right now as we talk about this. If you're listening and you're like, well, of course you got to do what's good, and that sometimes good is opposed to right. But where that gets complicated really complicated is when you get to gray area issues of faith. And I think where that's so significant is churches, the church, big capital C, have often felt like their job is to come alongside Jesus followers and teach them what's right.
Right.
The reason you come to church every Sunday morning is for us to tell you what's right and what's wrong. And I think it's often led people to have this picture in their mind of what it means to follow Jesus is to do right. And so what happens if we were to say to people, maybe we've been asking the wrong question all the time? Like when people come up to me and they say, this church over here thinks that this activity is okay. What does your church believe about that? There's a part of me, because we've been having this conversation for 6 years, that goes, I think you're asking the wrong question,
right?
Which is, you want to know what I think is right, what God thinks is right, what the Bible might say is right. But Jesus tended to ask, what is good?
Good. Yep.
And it's a very different question.
Oh, and it leads you to a very different conclusion and a very different way of living and acting, because it's no longer about following rules. And you'll see as we go through this class, you'll see as we look at scripture, there are very few times that Jesus walks into a situation and he says, like, this is the rule you have to follow. This is what's right. Most often he walks into the middle of a mess and he brings about restoration. And you do that by discovering what is good.
And just to be clear for everybody listening, in case you're worried that Jodie's become an anarchist, although listen, if you're listening and you're an anarchist, we love you and you're welcome at Crossings as well.
Yeah.
But I just mean to say, most often good and right are the same thing. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, 90% of the time that's the case. But it's the 10% that it seems to me Christians spend a lot of time arguing over.
Right.
And this is really valuable. And here's where it goes to grace then, and your title and your concept that you'll be walking people through. And maybe I'll go to your class. This would be a fun one. I'd love to just sit through this again. Maybe not. Yeah. You're looking at me weird. Don't come to this class. But I think where this is so significant, it was about right and wrong up until Jesus ushers in grace. So it is understandable. The world was based on a system of right and wrong, karma. You reap what you sow. It very much was that way. Jesus comes in and says, let me explain to you grace, or exemplify grace, and let me be grace for you on the cross. And that is where all this comes in. And I think sometimes as Jesus followers, we don't get it, and we kind of fall back into this old way of living.
Right. It's hard to get out of it. I think that, here's what I'll say. The reason it's hard to get out of it is because the 4 areas that we are looking at in this class, all of those trajectories have gotten off, which is why it's hard to get out of any one trajectory, because they all kind of build on each other. And so when we do this class, we're not looking at these siloed things. All of these things working together will make sense. And you're just going to have to trust me on that if you come to the class. And so I will say this. I hope you don't think I am an anarchist and that there's no right and wrong. That's not what I'm saying.
Yep.
When you see how these things build on each other, they're kind of like a checks and balance system for each other. It'll make sense.
Awesome.
It'll make sense, I promise.
I believe it. My door is ringing. I don't know if everybody heard that through the podcast, but I just saw Zach Hamstra, our middle school pastor, walk up to my front door.
Yeah, he's dropping off treats to all the middle school students.
He is. How cool is that? All right, I'm going to end the podcast so I can answer it.
Okay,
Jodie,
bye.
Thank you. Great job. Yeah. Appreciate it. We're excited for your class.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Bye.